All right, Mark, we got to lead off this episode of the NHL Recap Show with a quick little emergency recording here. There was some breaking news literally like 10 minutes after we stopped recording. But so on Tuesday, of course, Corey Perry, he was placed on waivers by the Chicago Blackhawks with the purpose of terminating his contract. The team sort of came out from there and said that it was a workplace matter. They had ran an investigation into this workplace matter. But then from there online, there was a bunch of disgusting rumors sort of starting to fly around. Tuesday, GM Kyle Davidson, he held a press conference, and the main thing sort of to take away from there was that he basically said that this does not involve any other players or their family members. And now on Wednesday, the Blackhawks have terminated Corey Perry's contract after he cleared waivers, but an NHL Players Association spokesperson has said that they are reviewing the matter to determine if they will file a grievance, which they have 60 days to do so. Just to start off here, like, how do you think do you think the Blackhawks did a good job handling this? Because I think they could have done a lot better, but I'm interested to see what you have to say first here.
I don't really know if I can like fully answer that question until like we find out like exactly what happened, I guess. I'm kind of curious to know why you don't think they handled it properly. Or is it more because we don't know the full story?
Because there's just a real lack of transparency, it feels like here. Like, for me, if I was the Chicago Blackhawks, the second that these disgusting like social media rumors started to gain any traction, I would have come out and said at that point that this does not involve any other players or their family members. Honestly, when they released their official statement saying that Corey Perry was being put on waivers with the intention of terminating his contract, I would have even added in there that like this is a workplace matter and it does not involve any other players or their team members. Like, looking back in hindsight, it's always 2020, but these social media rumors, like, we all know what they were. We all have social media and have been on there over the past like 48 to 72 hours. And like, those social media rumors were like really ugly. It dragged a player and his family sort of through the mud, man. Like, I just think the Chicago Blackhawks should have been a lot quicker to dealing with that aspect of this whole scenario than they were, because like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be jumping straight to it and giving us that part of the information before like it got out of hand. Because I really think those social media rumors got way out of hand. Like, that wasn't necessary at all, right?
No, it wasn't. I understand what you mean for that. I guess they could have shut it down earlier, but I mean, in accordance to like, I guess like going through the process of like, in case something happened, like he's immediately scratched and then like it's looked into and then they realize it's bad enough to terminate his contract. Like as of right now, I feel like they followed the right steps in accordance to that. Like I do get what you mean though, in accordance to maybe they could have at least acknowledged those social media like rumors much faster, because it kind of was like getting really out of hand in my opinion. But I just think on the other hand, as of now, they also might not be able to say like exactly what's going on, right? Like we don't know exactly what happened. There could be like some laws behind like them releasing information at this very like point. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's why like a lot of people are saying, oh, they're covering it up again. Like I don't necessarily like agree with that. Like I guess it is possible, but like I'm looking at it on the other side in this, to be honest, because like they did some bad things, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing is though, it's like the owner's not there anymore. The GM was there is not there anymore. This new guy's come in. He doesn't really have like a history with any of this stuff, right? Like, so I don't really like this organization anyway, but like I don't really have an issue with him at all. Like he's kind of just come in and like done his job so far. And it's like I don't personally feel like, especially watching that interview from him, that like he wants to be involved in like any of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
He was emotional, man.
That's what I mean. Like, so
like he was almost crying.
That's what I mean. So it's like I don't necessarily think that. I'm trying to look at it like on more of a positive side for the Hawks, I guess. But it's like there's always that possibility that like it's like they are covering it up or covering something up, I guess. But I'm just not really buying it right now, to be quite honest with you.
I'm not buying. I'm like, I don't think they're trying to cover up anything either. I just think for like a lot of the fans or people looking at this at home, like there's just sort of like it does feel like there's a lack of transparency with this. And then since it is an organization where you've had a lot of major issues in the past, like a lot of people are just going to go ahead and assume the worst. I think, as you said, though, I think they did a good job sort of handling like the termination of it. I just think just with the aspect of the social media rumors and like sort of how disgusting and ugly those were, I just think they should have honestly been a bit quicker there to protect their player. And then the other thing
That's
is
also not necessarily though, like I do agree with that, but that also might not be like Davidson's decision.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to actually like go out and say it at that point. Like, so it's like I'm not really like looking at like him specifically for that. It's more like I'd like look to the organization, like guys making like final choices for like that kind of stuff, right? Like,
And then the other thing to keep in mind here, like you mentioned it with the laws, is like the Players Association is involved, and like at the end of the day, we all sort of look at this as a game, and it's the NHL, and these guys are playing a sport, but sort of something that you got to keep in mind at home is that like this is also a workplace, right? Like there's worker rights, there's protections and all of that. So it's for the Blackhawks, you don't know how much they can really say here and give you all the information just because the Players Association, and there's probably a bunch of lawyers on each side involved though. Do you have anything else really to say about this matter, or should we move on and get into the start of the episode?
well, I just wanted to say like a little bit more information about it besides what you added. So like Emily Kaplan came out today. I don't know where she got this information, but it says that Davidson said the team was first notified of the allegations last week when they were about to play the Blue Jackets the day of. Then Perry, he was immediately scratched, and then they essentially like overviewed everything, and then that went into their final decision about it, because Corey Perry was with the team in Columbus. He was at the game when he was scratched. Obviously, like the day after that, he wasn't at practice or anything along those lines, but he also like traveled to the rink without the team in Columbus. So I mean, there was already stuff obviously going on before that point, but that was also just something else to add, like in the news of all this going on. So it's, I don't know if it happened necessarily in Columbus or it was they were notified while they were in Columbus, but that's essentially like when it broke down.
Yeah, and there's definitely going to be a lot more coming out over the next period of time, I'd think. Like if the NHL Players Association does file a grievance, if they don't, I think we probably will get a bit more light on this matter. Maybe not soon, but at some point before the end of the season, we'll know more about sort of what went on, I think. But yeah, I think we should get going and make our way on to the start of the podcast now. What's going on, everybody? You're listening to episode 9 of the Point NHL Recap Show. I'm Pascal Pryor, joined by Mark Howlerlack. Mark, to start off the show, how you doing, man? I know you got some time off today and early this week. You enjoying that, buddy, or what?
Pretty enjoying the day off today, man. Getting a new phone actually soon. Getting the winter tires on. Winter's coming up here in Canada. Man, no Montreal tonight or yesterday, but I'm fired up to watch this Leaf Florida game after what happened last night in the Panthers Ottawa game, Tkachuk brothers. We're going to get into it in a little bit, but man, just enjoying, ready to watch some hockey tonight. How you doing, buddy?
Dude, I'm doing great, man. Not gonna lie, this snowfall here in Ontario, I'm loving it. It's really starting to feel like winter now. I'm a pretty big winter guy, not gonna lie. But yesterday driving, man, like I was driving, don't have the winters on, dude. Fuck, I was sliding around and shit. I was like, this ain't too fun. But other than that, man, I'm having a great time. Yeah, I know you were on the 401. That's always fun driving on there with a little snowstorm. It's usually a shit show for those of you that don't know and don't live in Ontario. We got some big news, though. Let's get right into it right now. Patrick Kane, he has officially signed. We were talking about it all last week on the podcast. He signed a one-year deal worth $2.75 million with the Detroit Red Wings. Last season, he had 21 goals and 36 assists for 57 points. So he had a down year, but man, it's still Patty Kane. The biggest thing, though, is Patrick Kane. He's going to be reunited with Alex DeBrincat. Those two together in Chicago, they played really good together. And DeBrincat had his best 2 seasons in the NHL playing alongside Patty Kane. He had 2 40-goal seasons there. And then we're recording. It's about 1:30, 2 o'clock now on Tuesday. This came out just a few minutes ago before we started the recording. Daniel Sprong, he currently wears number 88 for the Red Wings right now. But I saw on Twitter, somebody posted on Twitter that he is going to be giving up his number 88 to Patrick Kane. So you'll see Patty Kane in that.
Mad respects.
In that red 88 again. What do you think of the signing for the Red Wings, though? How are you liking it?
I mean, how can you really look at it anything besides like a positive, right? They've been a pretty good team so far this year. Like they're sitting in a playoff spot right now. You're getting another guy who's at worst going to be in your like a top 6 caliber player. I don't expect them to really like drive the offense or anything like that, but this is all really going to end up depending on like how good he does with like how healthy he is. I feel like with his hip. Hopefully he's recovered and he's doing like much better. Man, I'm kind of excited to see him and DeBrincat back again. I'm kind of predicting DeBrincat's going to hit 40 goals again this year. Like he started off really hot without Patrick Kane. It's only a 1-year deal. It's not a huge risk, right? Man, if Detroit even somehow like slips out of the playoffs, like before the deadline, you could easily deal this guy. Like, you know what I mean? He's on a short, really small cap hit. I'm kind of like, are you a bit surprised he chose Detroit though? Or like, I kind of thought he was going to go to Florida, to be honest.
I was thinking Florida too, but like, Florida wouldn't have been able to offer him this 2.75. Like
I really wonder if the money mattered to him. I heard he was asking for a multi-year deal. I feel like he backed out of that though, considering next year he can sign and get like a 35+ deal with bonuses. But Friedman said something interesting on his pod yesterday. So he didn't really want to go to the West apparently because of the travel. And then someone was telling Friedman, well, why would he go to Florida then when Florida and Tampa have the most travel in the Eastern Conference? So, I mean, that kind of makes sense too. Detroit, there's not really a ton of travel. You can pretty much drive to a lot of places, potentially even like get home in the same night. You know what I mean? I heard he really liked like Derek Lalonde, the coach, like kind of the way he's playing, the structure of the team right now. And he thinks like he can fit in really nicely there. But dude, Kane, DeBrincat, Larkin, like I don't even like Detroit. I'm pretty excited to watch this. I'm going to see Detroit play the Leafs in January too. So, I mean, like I'm pretty pumped to watch Kane play in person.
The other thing with him going to Detroit is, of course, he's from Buffalo, and like Detroit's just like a stone toss away from Buffalo, right?
So it's not too far.
He's like super close to home as well, which definitely helps out with him signing there. The one thing that I absolutely hate though about this signing is, dude, I got Lucas Raymond in fantasy because I thought he was going to go off on that top line this year with DeBrincat and Larkin, but yeah, it's looking like he might be getting traded off the Pascal Pryor fantasy roster in the coming weeks here now that Patty Kane's there.
Honestly, it's going to suck for him going down to that line, but I mean, like Comfers looked really good for them too, right? So now you got a second line of like Perron, Comfer, and Raymond. Maybe his point total is going to dip a bit, but hopefully Raymond still gets like a lot of power play time still, and he's like playing with those guys, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I still think he'll be good, but it's just sort of unfortunate that he's not going to be on that top line anymore, which looks like a really good line. But yeah, this team, it's going to be a blast to watch going forward. And like if Patty Kane's healthy, like man, watch out because this team could make some rumblings here in the Eastern Conference. I think we should move our way out west though. There was some pretty big news with the Minnesota Wild. They've fired their head coach Dean Evison and assistant coach Bob Woods as well. Evison coached for the Wild for 5 seasons. They're on a 7-game losing streak right now, so like not really performing the best. And longtime NHL coach John Hines, he's going to take over with the Wild. I know we were talking about him last week, Mark, and how they were sort of on a skid here. Do you think this firing though it was like deserved?
Not really. I kind of think this is pretty similar to like with the Woodcroft situation. You're kind of getting some poor play and like pretty awful goaltending. And like Everson, like Minnesota they've never really had playoff success, right? But they've always been able to get there. And he's got a pretty similar like winning percentage to Woodcroft, and he's got a much bigger sample size as him as well, right? He's been there for 5 years. I think Everson is going to be like Woodcroft, and he's going to end up finding another job. I think this is just like the fastest thing for the Wild to do right now. Like getting rid of a coach. Their cap situation really screws them, right? With those two guys getting dead cap, which is like $14.5 million. Billy G doesn't really have a lot to work with. This doesn't really surprise me that he was fired or that Minnesota's kind of not great this year. I just don't know what John Hines is going to bring that Evason's not.
Yeah.
It could end up working out. He was pretty decent with New Jersey. He got another gig in Nashville. He was fired from that before this season here, but I don't know. I don't really see Minnesota like rebounding and like getting into the playoffs, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you on when you mentioned the Jay Woodcroft, how it's sort of similar to there. It's just like who's expendable, right? Like who can we get rid of here and sort of find a way to make a change? And at the end of the day, it just comes down to your head coach, right?
And the thing with Minnesota is, right, they locked up Zuccarello, Hartman, and Foligno, who were going to expire at the end of the year to contract extensions starting next year. So it's like they're not going to move any of those guys. Like they just locked them up. Like you're not moving Kaprizov, Boldy. I don't know. Like if this continues though, like maybe they're going to have to do something. But I mean, like I think they're pretty set on like their core right now, if you know what I mean. And I think they just want like someone else in there that could potentially like just make a change, bring a different system in that would work for this team.
Yeah, I don't like that they're sort of set on their core, man. Because like outside of Kaprizov, Boldy, and then like Brock Faber, like I'd be more than willing to move on from any of those guys.
Yeah, I actually I because of they're so thin at center. I like Eriksson Ek, and I think he's on a solid contract too. He's more of like a better 2C, but I feel like he's better. He's part of the solution, I guess. Just making like $5 million. Like they need guys like that, man. Like a guy making $5 million that can play second line center with their cap situation. Yeah, Brock Faber as well. Like, man, he's been the bright spot of this team this year. Like they've been bad, but like Spurgeon's been out. He's been playing that top pair, looking so nice. Like at least getting rid of Fiala, they've gotten something back here that is something to look forward to for the future. But this team, man, like their goaltending's been bad. Like Gustafsson was one of the best goalies in the league last year, and now he can't figure it out.
Well, for me, their goaltending's been bad, as you just mentioned. And then the other thing for this team is like they just don't have that top end talent. Like they're a really deep team, but they don't have that top end talent enough of it. You have Kaprizov and Boldy who are your top end talent, but you sort of need like two more guys who can.
I think they were hoping Rossi was going to step into that, but it's not really it's not working out, at least so far.
And
he's still young.
You can't expect him to do that this year. Like he's still young. It's early on in his career. You know what I mean? Like you need a guy who's like has proven that he's a top player and can play on like your first line or second line, where they just don't have that. So now that Kaprizov and Boldy like aren't producing what they did last season, and they're sort of a bit cold right now, you don't have anybody else to really step to help carry the load.
I don't see them turning around this year at all. I think some changes are going to come later in the year with this team.
I think we should move on to All Star Weekend though. There's some massive news about this over the last couple of days. I think you texted me the other night actually, and you just said player draft is back for All Star Weekend. That got me fucking hyped up to see, buddy. I was absolutely loving that. So here's the news that sort of has come out over the last couple of days. As I just mentioned, the event, it will go back to a player draft. So we're going to love seeing that. Basically, the way the player draft is going to work is you're going to have 4 team captains, and each captain they're going to be paired up with like a celebrity, a guest, whatever you want to call it. And the celebrity and the captain combined, they'll be selecting players to fill out the rosters for All-Star Weekend. And then the draft, it's going to be held Thursday night. So previously, Thursday night was just sort of a whatever night for the NHL All-Star Weekend. And then you got like skills competition Friday night, of course. And then the game Saturday. So now you're sort of getting another night here where you're going to have some action going on. I think this is one of the only good things the NHL has actually done this year, to be honest. Are you liking that the player draft is coming back?
Oh, man, I'm actually fired up. I like this, man. I think it's like really good entertainment. And I feel like we don't even know who like the captains are, and we won't for a while, and like the celebrity guests. But like, man, what is this, some like actor or something like that? This is going to bring in like more viewership, I feel like, for people that maybe aren't even that interested in hockey, and like one of their favorite actors is like part of this draft. Like, I think it's going to be super cool, to be honest. It's in Toronto, right? So I'm assuming there's going to be a Leaf that's a captain. At this point, Nylander is probably a really good possibility to be one of these 4 captains. I think that'd be really cool. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much else to say really about that besides, like, I think it's a really good idea that they're bringing it back. An extra day too as well is pretty cool. And kind of curious to see who like the other captains are going to end up being. So it's not like it has nothing to do with divisions now, right? Like we could have like 3 captains from the Eastern Conference, right? Like
I didn't see that. I don't think they fully figured out like how the captains is going to work, if it's like fan votes or if it's the NHL that's deciding the captains. But I'd think you could have 4 captains all from the same like division.
yeah, like if it comes to that, yeah, I don't think that is going to happen. But I mean, I don't think there's any like restrictions on it. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, also in this game, like we're gonna have a 3-on-3 women's game. Obviously, they just started their league, like their training camp recently. They're getting their season going in January. I think this is a pretty nice showcase for them as well, being that there's only 6 teams in this women's league, right? And this All-Star game's in Toronto, where one of the teams are. Is all 6 teams coming to this for the women's game? Like, and there's just a couple players on each team like representing, or is there not really information out about that either?
I didn't see anything about that. The Sportsnet article I was reading basically just mentioned like there's also going to be a 3-on-3 women's game.
It would be like cool if they could play like a mini tournament as well. Like if you could kind of like get that in, a couple 3-on-3 mini games or something like that, a couple players from each team. You know what I mean? Like even like, you know how when they announced the teams, they announced 3 players right off the bat for each team that were already on the team. Like it'd be cool if they sent those people. Like, you know what I mean? Like Sarah Nurse and all those players.
Honestly, what I do, dude, is I just throw, like, instead of having a women's game separate, I just throw them into the draft.
Oh, that's a good idea too, man.
Because like the biggest thing why like you wouldn't want the woman playing against like the NHL players is because of like risk of injury, because of like size different stuff like that. But like,
well, and they don't play with body checking either, right?
In this day and age, nobody tries in the All-Star game. It's just
a game of shinny.
It's a game of shinny. So it's like if the women are playing, like they have just as much skill as the men, right? The only thing is just that physical, like the weight, the body checking, right? Like, but if it's a game of shinny, which it is nowadays, like why don't you just throw them in and prove to all the haters as well that like, yeah, they do have just as much as skill as these NHL players.
Yeah, 100%. That's actually a good idea. I wonder if they're going to consider doing that. But if they don't, I feel like I hope they get more than just like one little 3-on-3 game.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Dude, I think I just had back-to-back weeks of good ideas that the NHL's starting to pick up on.
Man, honestly, you never know. They could listen to this, and next pod we could be talking about that this is what they're doing.
Might be the NHL's newest hire, Gary Bettman's assistant. Fuck that. I would never work for that guy. But yeah, no, all around, I'm really excited for this All-Star weekend. Honestly, the draft I'm the most excited for. Like, I saw the Ovechkin clip from, I think it was 2015, like the last player draft they did, where he wanted to go last so he could win the card. And the whole time he's like, I need a car. And then he ends up getting picked like third last. He was just pissed. But I'm hoping there's going to be some good moments like that. We should move on to the Sens Panthers, though.
Holy crap, buddy. Am I fired up to talk about this?
Same, dude. This game was fucking wild. 167 penalty minutes in the game. Yeah, you heard that correctly. I don't know the last time we saw that, but it was a lot. It was a lot of PIMs in this one. If you're in a PIM fantasy league, fuck, you were just rocking all last night. So it all started off where early in the third period, Zach McEwen elbowed Matthew Tkachuk in the head. He sort of like took him to the ground and just started feeding him with punches. It was a pretty weird scenario though, there, considering the puck was nowhere near Zach McEwen. He sort of just stayed across the ice to him and tried to dummy him. So that happened. Zach McEwen, he got a 5-minute major for that. Then a few minutes later, Jake Sanderson, Matthew Tkachuk, they decided to drop the mitts, getting a little tangle there. Dude, I love that fight, man. Matthew Tkachuk, you know what that guy has, Mark? He has some big balls, man. Some big balls, dude. Because Zach McEwen goes after Matthew Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk doesn't like that. Minutes later, he's back out on the ice. He goes, you know what? I'm going to go after your new young stud defenseman. Sanderson decides, yeah, I'll take the fight.
I think you meant to say Sanderson has some balls, not Tkachuk.
Yeah, Sanderson has some balls. He drops the mitts. But you know what I loved from Tkachuk, man? This guy, dude, takes his helmet off. He does a little helmet flip toss, points at his head, looking at staring Sanderson down, going, I'm about to fight you with my helmet off, you pussy. Fucking take your helmet off. Sanderson doesn't. Sanderson steps in. Tkachuk just feeds him 1-2 and takes him to the ground. Dude, I love that.
I mean, yeah, it was cool to see. It's not like going in like you wouldn't really expect Sanderson to win that anyway, but I agree, man. He's got some balls doing that, dude. Like, it's a bit risky. Like, if you're a Sens fan, you're probably like, oh, geez, like, we don't want this guy to fight. But I mean,
what's going on here?
It proves a lot. I just thought it was a gutless play by McEwen. I get you might not like what Tkachuk did with the hit, like, and I don't even think it was dirty. But it's like, dude, if you want to fight the guy, like, go over, like, just give him a little cross check. Let him turn around and be like, buddy, you want to go? Like, why are you jumping? Dude, like, he's a McEwen, dude. He's not even like a full-time NHL player, dude. Like he was already on waivers this season. Like, he's played in Belleville. It's like, I mean, like, after that, it's like, I don't know. If I'm the Sens, I'm just like, I don't really know if I want this guy on the team. But the thing is like, Ottawa kind of lacks that, like, what McEwen brings, right? But he's just not really a solid player all around. To do it to Tkachuk out of anyone, too, it's like, dude, like, what do you expect? Like, shit's going to be coming. Like, the one thing about Florida, man, like, do you realize it's like, they're kind of like Tampa in the sense now. It's like, bro, if you go after one guy, all 5 guys are coming in.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think it's a whole team mentality. If you look at Florida's roster from top to bottom, like, they don't have a lot of guys where you're like, I don't want to say necessarily scared of, but it's like they have guys that will fight, right? Like, they have Tkachuk, they got Bennett. They lost Gudis this summer, but they got like Lomberg and like Steven Lorenz. Like, those are the 4 guys that I think are big, but it's like, dude, Verhaeghe will go in there. Reinhart will go in there. Barkov's not going to fight, dude, but he's going in the scrum.
He's going to mix it up.
You know what I mean? It's like, and especially when you're doing it to Matthew Tkachuk, dude, like, they're going to be pissed. Like, and the whole like Brady Tkachuk thing after, when he kind of hit Bobrovsky's pad, like, oh man, that after, like, I just know Brady Tkachuk the way he is and how he's like, the fight's over and he's still like freaking punching Louis Sterainen in the face and it starts a whole other scrum behind the net and he gets a 4-minute plus a 10. Man, that was just some entertainment. They ended up with what, 5 guys on the bench each by the end of it, like for the last 5 or 6 minutes of the game?
Yeah, so after the scrum where there was a Brady Tkachuk incident, there was a clip. I saw there was a clip on going sort of berserk on social media, and basically it was the ref announcing the penalties, and he just goes up, flips his mic on, and goes, like, every player on the ice, 10-minute misconduct. Florida gets a power play because of the Brady Tkachuk goal.
Yeah, I know. He said Tkachuk's got a 2 and 2. He's got like 2 for roughing, 2 for cross-checking, and everyone's got a 10. So what do you think about that? Like, obviously it's a huge scrum. That happens a lot though, but like, do you like that he just gave everyone a 10?
Yeah, dude, like, at that point,
is it just because it's 4-0 and there's under 10 minutes left?
It's because it's 4-0. There's 10 minutes left, and at that point in the game, like, this was the 3rd incident in the game, right? It started off with the McEwen Tkachuk thing, then with like that was around with 9 minutes left, I think. Then with like 7 minutes left, or no, that was with 14 minutes left. The McEwen Tkachuk, pardon me, with 9 minutes left, you had the Sanderson Tkachuk fight. And then with 7 minutes left in the game, you had the scrum resulting in all the players on the ice getting 10-minute misconducts. Like, at that point, dude, it was a 4-0 game. If you kept those players in the game, dude, there's gonna, like, that last 7 minutes, man, like, would have taken 4 hours to play. There would have been a scrum after every whistle. Like, it would have been ugly. Honestly, dude, if the NHL allowed like runoff clock like they do in beer league and like minor league hockey, I think they probably would have given a 10 to every player and just like played runoff clock.
Run the clock, dude. Once it hits 5-0, just run the clock.
Dude, take 5 minutes to figure out who's getting all the penalties and have like 30 seconds left on the clock to drop the puck. Like,
the thing was though, it's like it kicked everyone out, but then he still kicked out 2 more guys like later on, Joseph, and I forget who was on Florida. He gave them a 10 because they did like a little slash behind the net. I was just like, Man, like, I don't know. This is just like ridiculous. Like everyone's like out of the game at this point.
But yeah, as you mentioned earlier, so there was 5 players left on the bench for the Senators. And then Florida had 6 players left. I'm like, dude, Paul Maurice, there was a clip of Paul Maurice walking up and down the bench. He's like, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5, 6, 7. Okay, we have 7 players.
And he started laughing.
We have 1 defenseman. Like, just figure it out here, boys. And that was with 7 minutes left, man. Like, it's like, dude, you have 7 players on your bench for the last 7 minutes of the game, dude. Like, fuck, bro. So that's
they held down the fort though. Right Bob got the shutout.
All around, dude, it was a wild game. Panthers Leafs tonight. Ryan Reeves, he's in the lineup. Might see a little something going on there. I know we're excited for that game.
I'm kind of curious to see like if Florida's going to come out like guns blazing just because of how this game ended.
Yeah.
And obviously like they played in the playoffs last year as well, right? Got a little bit nasty at times, but it's going to be a big game tonight, man. I'm not even a Leaf or Panther fan, but I'm pretty excited to watch this.
It's definitely going to be an exciting game to watch. I think we should talk more about the Leafs, though, before this game, sort of see where they're at right now in the season, see how one of their fans is feeling. So I think it's time we bring on Derek Demmans. Well, now it's time to move on to the Leafs. And this episode, Mark, we love our guests. So we're bringing on Derek Demmans. He's a top 5 Ginger of all time and an avid Leafs fan. So we'll bring him on now to talk about the Leafs. Derek, just to start off, though, man, how are you doing? What's new with you, buddy?
I'm doing good, boys. Thanks for having me. I'm just hanging out today. Just a day off this week. Looking forward to the Leafs game tonight, especially after what happened with the Florida game last night in Ottawa.
That was a quite eventful game last night. I'm kind of curious to see how that turns over to the Leafs today, especially with like Reeves in the lineup. But Pascal,
Yeah.
I kind of want to get into a couple things, like with Derek right off the bat here at the Leafs. So I don't know, like, how would you say the season's going so far? Like, you guys are obviously in a playoff spot, like maybe a little bit underwhelming if you ask me.
Yeah, to be quite honest, it's been pretty disappointing this year, especially with all the hype in the off season, bringing in guys like you mentioned, Reeves and Max Domi and John Klingberg, and none of these guys are living up to all the hype. It's been very disappointing.
So the guy behind all these like big acquisitions over the offseason, it was Brad Treliving, and he's still early on in his tenure, but sort of how do you feel so far from what you've seen with him managing the Leafs roster?
I mean, he's a new GM coming into a team that has been a playoff team. They've had regular season success. They just got over the hump last season in the first round, getting through to the second round finally after however many years it's been. He's just trying to learn the team and learn learn the way they play, learn the guys' styles, and just trying to get these guys to fit in, these new guys. And it's been tough to watch, to be perfectly honest with you guys.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with him too is like he's not close to being finished with this team. Like we all know he wants to go and get that defenseman to really bolster up your defensive core. But so far from what you've seen with this team, D, like what are your expectations for this team going forward this season?
Well, I think our main priority right now is find that defenseman. Like we have Morgan Riley, who's been an absolute treasure to this team. I honestly think he should be our captain. It'd be a great marketing opportunity to Captain Morgan.
No big deal.
Anyways, yeah, but then you got TJ Brody, who's been arguably Riley's best defense partner through his career, and Riley's been with this team since 2012, which is a complete joke that's been his best defense partner. But after that, you brought in John Klingberg, and I just don't know why.
That hasn't really worked out well at all.
No, and he's a puck-moving defenseman, power play specialist. You already have that in Morgan Riley. I know they want to venture Riley to more like a PK role, maybe more 5-on-5 time, but That's not what the Leafs needed in Klingberg. They needed, like they had, and they had Luke Shen at the end of last season. That's the type of defenseman they need right now. They're just missing that physical presence on the back end.
And Shen was a really good ad last year. I felt like he played pretty well with Riley going into the playoffs. I personally just think Tree Living's thought process was he may have watched like a little bit of the playoffs, and like Riley was really only kind of the guy who was like the puck moving guy, you know what I mean? Getting it out of the zone instead of just like flicking it out off the glass. So I kind of understand Klingberg in that mentality, but he's just never been anything but a liability defensively. So I never thought it was a good signing like right from the start. Kind of curious to see like where this thing goes though, right? Is he going to be on LTIR all season? Like if it is, that's a lot of money you have freed up to like bring in another guy, like over $4 million.
Yeah, like he signed for that $4 million, and I think I've been reading a little bit about it the last few days, and he injured himself like in the first week of the season and was just kind of playing through it. And I guess this was like an ongoing injury he's been kind of dealing with through his career. But how do you not know about this injury when you sign the guy?
Especially if he's been dealing with it in other years besides this one as well, right?
For sure. And I mean, his agent turned down that long-term deal in Dallas to try and get him more money, and now he's getting 1-year deals. Like these teams know he's a liability out there.
Yeah, and he's not even doing the same stuff offensively as he used to, right? He used to be so good at walking the line and like just running the power play, but it's probably some of that hip issue, right? That he's not able to kind of do the same things that he's been really good at in the past.
For sure.
So like going on to like a couple other things with the Leafs, man, like William Nylander, like obviously this guy's been a great player for the Leafs for a long time now, but he's just hit another level this season, right? Like he's leading the team in scoring. I don't know how many games it was before his point streak was lost. Was it 17 or 18? What are you seeing from him that's different this year? Like I said, he's been a great player in his career, but he's been playing like one of the better players in the NHL so far this season.
He's got something to prove this year. He's in a contract year. He saw Matthews just sign his deal, which was over $11.5 million. He's always been kind of I don't want to say whipping boy, but he's the one who had to take the discount on his last contract when Matthews and Marner were getting 10 plus. Tavares is getting 11. Nylander's always been that fourth guy. And I think he's tired of it. Like he's been playing with Tavares most of his career, arguably. And Tavares has really had to drive that line the last few years because Nylander's been so streaky. This year, I think you're starting to see Tavares. He's getting older. He's starting to slow down a little bit, and Nylander's just picked up right where he needed to, and he's the one driving that line right now.
So
it's quite interesting to see, man. Go ahead, Pascal.
Keep on going with William Nylander. Of course, you mentioned the contract year, and that sort of, I think that talk's going to really pick up as the season goes on. But right now, what do you expect his next contract to look like?
That's $1 million question right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
probably $1 million more than when he started the season too.
At least you'd think.
Well, yeah, you start off with 17 games in a row with at least a point, and now he's come back from the Sweden trip, and now he hasn't had a point in 2 games. So, are they talking now? Are they negotiating? Who knows? But I think we're looking at
he's getting into that 11 million range kind of now.
It's at least double digits.
Yeah.
Dude, I think he's 11.5, man.
Really? That's a lot though, man. Like
But man, like my argument for that is Marner's making 10.9. Actually, he's making 10.93. Don't forget the 9.3 because of his fucking juniors number. But
Thanks,
like Marner's making 10.93 right now. He just got bumped down the second line. Willie got put up to the first line because Marner's not playing well. Like, dude, if I'm William Nylander's camp, I'm using all of this and saying, why should I not be getting paid more than him right now?
100%.
I have a question for you about the Marner Nylander thing here.
Mm-hmm.
So if just with the way the salary cap is for Toronto, like keeping both of those guys and then Matthews, like you guys are gonna have a lot of money locked in here with your top like 4 or 5 guys. So if the Leafs like did decide to move on from one of these wingers, who do you give up? Would you give up Nylander or would you give up Marner? And like why would your decision to be either guy?
It's always going to be a tough call here. With how well Nylander has started, I think his trade value is super high right now. I think you could get a very good return for him. Maybe you get that defenseman you desperately need on the back end. Maybe you pick up a goaltender, maybe a third line center. Maybe you try to get all three. You put a package together. I really don't know, but those are the 3 needs they need right now.
Thinking about a trade.
Go ahead. My
Thinking
bad.
about a trade now, Brad Treliving, we know he's not shy of making big trades. Do you, being a Leafs fan, how do you feel about this? William Nylander to the Calgary Flames, and in return you get Zadorov, Tanev, Lindholm, and then like maybe a prospect or a pick.
I think Calgary says no on that trade.
You think so, eh?
How much does Lindholm get paid right now?
Well, Lindholm's a UFA at the end of the season too, right? So
He's just
gonna,
under $5 million, I think.
but
Okay.
he's gonna get a decent pay bump here.
Now, does he play more center or more wing?
He plays center. I think he'd fit in perfectly as a second line center, and you could move JT over to the wing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they tried that in preseason with Nylander playing center, and Tavares, he's been a center his whole career. And I think when he gets moved out of that position and is restricted to playing half the ice, he gets frustrated. He gets lost out there. He can't play his style of game. So I think Tavares needs to stay at that center position.
That's fair. That's fair. I was just thinking like Treliving, he has some connections with the Flames, like you'd be able to get 2 defensemen and a center out of that. That was the one trade that was coming to my mind.
Man, that'd be a
there when you
pretty
mentioned.
crazy deal, though. Like a bunch of expiring unrestricted free agents getting traded for each other.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like getting a goalie, like potentially. Like, how confident are you in this tandem right now? Like Samsonov's been, I'd say, pretty bad this year for the most part. He's only really had a couple games, I feel like, where he's really given them a chance to win. But like besides that, like he's sitting at 4-1-3. Meanwhile, Woll is 6-5. And I feel like Woll's been the much better goalie this year. Like, how do you see this playing out? You think they're going to run with these guys all year? If they do you see Woll like potentially being like the opening playoff starter this year? Or like, how do you see this playing out?
It's been very shaky so far this season, honestly, with both of them. Woll's just getting started in his career. Yes, he's looked good. I think the Leafs actually do play better in front of him, more comfortable in front of him. He looks a lot calmer in the net, whereas Samsonov, he's like you said, he's only had a handful of good games. I'm not even going to say great games, but yeah, he looks shaky in the net. He gives up juicy rebounds. I think there is a need that they need to bring in another goaltender, but then you also have to think too. They've got Martin Jones sitting with the Marlies right now. I'm not saying he's the answer to this, but is there anything wrong with calling him up, playing him for, a couple weeks, see what he's got?
Give Samsonov a little bit of a push. Like he's at 10 games right now and under an 880. Like it hasn't really been getting better. You know what I mean? Like you were saying, like handful of games. Like the only one I can really think of, I watched that Boston game earlier in the year. I don't know if they ended up winning or losing that. Like that was the one game where I was like, okay, he looks pretty calm, cool, collected here. Like we haven't seen this year. And then it's like the next game, he's like right out of that again. And I think like Treliving, obviously, a couple of the signings haven't really turned out well, but I think the best thing he's done so far is not giving this guy a long-term contract. Because if you were talking about, if he got like a 4x4 in the summer, like we'd be looking at this like, oh my God, this is terrible right now. You know what I mean? But at least you're only committed to him for like the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree. Like I really don't know. And you can't blame him for all the goals against. The defense has not done their part either. And that's not their fault when you've got guys like William Lagesson in the lineup who should be with the Marlies, to be honest with you guys. Him and Max Lachois played a few games. These guys aren't NHL defensemen.
No, they're like fill-in guys. And I think Legisson's been doing all right at that role, but it's like it's not going to last all year. Like you need someone else.
Yeah, and there was injuries like with Klingberg, with McCabe. Liljegren took a couple of games off after that Marchand unfortunate incident.
Yeah, and Timmins has been out too. Well, he's back now, but I mean, you haven't had him most of the year either, right? So
I'm really excited to see Connor Timmins. He's been injury prone through the first few years of his career. When he's played, he's looked really good. He sets up a lot of guys for goals. I really am interested to see him play for an extended period of time.
Yeah, it should be fun seeing him come back into the lineup. D, of course, we got to thank you once again, buddy, for coming on. It's always a pleasure being in your presence, buddy. Getting to talk about the Leafs with you. I know this is the first time you've come on, but we're gonna have to get you back on at some point going forward again here.
Oh, 100%. Anytime, boys.
thanks a lot, D.
Yeah, thanks
buddy.
guys.
Well, Mark, it's always great to have Derek on the podcast. I'm thinking about it now. From work, we've had 2 of the 3 gingers on. So you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking at some point over the next month we got to get Josh on the podcast and complete the Thanos stone collection of the gingers from work. We should talk about the Boston Bruins right now, though. They've lost 3 straight games. They've let in 5 goals in each of these 3 losses. The crazy thing to me, though, is that they still have a 14-4-3 record. But like with them letting in 5 goals, do you think they need to add a defenseman here?
I kind of think so, but I don't really know if they're like gonna do it till like maybe like the deadline. I feel like they're gonna try and like figure it out just because like they had a really hot start, right? Like they've lost it's 3 straight in regulation, I believe now, and they're still 14-4-3. I don't know, man. I don't know if it's just because they lost Orlov, and I feel like they're lacking maybe another top 4 guy. Be kind of nicer to put like Grizzly down in that bottom pair. I don't really know who's out there for them right now. Like unless they're looking at like a Tanev Zadorov, you know what I mean? Like kind of like the Leafs are, but they're really tight to the cap too, right? So like they don't really have a ton of options. I feel like I'm not convinced with their decor, man. Like full out. Shattenkirk, yeah, getting him for $1 million was nice in the summer, but I don't really trust him in the top 4 anymore.
No. See, I have a proposition here for the Boston Bruins. This might be the dumbest thing you've ever heard, or it might be the most genius thing you've ever heard, but this is what it is. The Boston Bruins, they're lacking a little bit of defense. That's shown over their last few games here. They're also lacking a first-line center. So you know what you do to fix both problems at the same time?
You call Craig Conroy.
No. You call up Patrice Bergeron, the best two-way centerman arguably of all time, and you say, "Hey, how's retirement going? Oh, you're bored? It sucks. You're tired of watching the kids every day? Well, you know what? You're only 38 years old. You're probably still in shape. You've only been retired for like 6 months now. Come back and throw that Boston Bruins jersey on. First line centerman role. It's all yours. Come back, buddy." You think that's absurd or no? Like,
I don't think it's absurd. I just think it's kind of really unlikely, to be honest. I don't know. Didn't he just do an interview where he said he's like completely content about retirement?
I did not watch that interview before.
I swear he said he's like really happy where he's at and like his family and all that. So I feel like because of that, it's maybe a little bit absurd.
The guy's wife was probably watching the interview fucking live, man. Like he's got to say that, you know?
Man, so I got a question. So how in this situation are you fixing the D problem too by calling Bergeron?
Well, you're getting the best two-way centerman of all time.
That's true, but I mean, like I meant for like actual defensemen. But fair enough. Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah,
the best two-way center in the league. May as well throw him back on D sometimes too.
Honestly, I agree with you. I think this is super unlikely to happen. But like, I did hear like, would Patrice Bergeron maybe come out of retirement? I heard that on the Kipper and Bourne show last week, and I was like, honestly, man, like It is interesting because it's like when he retired, like we all thought Boston was going to take a step back going into the season. But it's like, man, they look like a great team once again. Their goaltending's great. Like they really have not many issues with this lineup. So like would Patrice Bergeron be like, yeah, maybe I'll come back for like the second half of the season and see if I can get one more cup. But yeah, I don't think it's happening. If it does though, man, that'd be the greatest comeback story since the Tom Brady one.
Dude, I was gonna say it'd be pretty cool if he did like a Tom Brady like comeback. He just like film himself somewhere and be like, you know what, I'm coming back.
Film himself on
Archie, you can stay captain, buddy, but we're going for it.
They win the cup, man. Every
Boston would be buzzing. The team would be fired up. Honestly, I think they'd probably at least do a little bit of damage.
We got to make this happen. I'm definitely going to blow up Patrice Bergeron's DMs once we're done recording this.
So, like, realistically, though, for this team, like, do you agree in the sense, like, they kind of need, like, another defenseman in the top four?
Yeah, I do think they do. You mentioned Zadorov and Tanev. I think Hanifin would be a great fit here.
Isn't he a Massachusetts guy, too?
I'm not 100% sure where he's from.
Because I think he's buddies with Eichel, and I feel like he grew up with Eichel, and Eichel's a Mass guy, right? So
now that you mention it, I think he is because he mentioned living there, I think.
I don't think there's a chance, though, they'd be able to re-sign him. Like, I think the cap's just going to be too tight. Hanifin's probably going to ask for too much money, I feel like. But, like, we only really talk, like, I feel like the last couple of weeks, and it makes sense that we're talking about Calgary for all these teams, like, who Calgary can give that these teams that would help. Like, is there anyone else around the league, like, you see, like, where it's, like, they can either help Boston or another team, like either whether it's at center or like on defense. Like the other guy before who I thought maybe Boston might go after was Scheifele. Like if Winnipeg didn't decide to re-sign him or if he was like, I'm not coming back. Like Hellebuck's name was out there too for some teams for goaltending issues. Those are two pretty big guys off the market, right? Like, do you know anyone else around the league where you feel like, yeah, he could fit well in Boston or like even anywhere else. Like for like, it's also they're really tight to the cap too, right? So you might have to send someone out.
I can't think of players for certain, but like when I'm looking at teams like Minnesota Wild potentially, would you consider that like moving on maybe from somebody?
The one guy you probably would be like Brodin. Like he's a really solid defensive defenseman that would help a lot of teams. But then again, like you're looking at $6 million and it's like, yeah, he's probably worth it, but it doesn't mean you can fit it in nicely. You know what I mean? Even if you're sending Grizzly the other way, he's making around $4 million. So the money doesn't really make sense.
We're also in a rough time right now in the season where it's like I'm looking at the standings right now and like in the Atlantic, there's not one team in the Atlantic right now that you can say would probably want to sell their players outside of maybe Montreal. But even Montreal, man, like, dude, you're only 5 points out of 500. Third.
Yeah,
you're only 5 points out of third in the Atlantic. Like, would you really even sell that much? You know, it's like looking at the Metro, like the Blue Jackets, like they're out of it. But even the Blue Jackets, like.
They've been kind of stringing some wins together lately.
Yeah, they've been playing better as of lately. Like the Devils are second last in the Metro. Like they're not selling. Pittsburgh's not selling. Islanders, like they're not selling. Like the only team that you would think would be sellers going into the season for sure, the Flyers, and they're third right now in the Metro. So it's like they're not selling right now. Like you look at the Central, Chicago, they're awful. But like who do you have to sell? Like Corey Perry's gone now. Like Taylor Hall's out for the rest of the season. Like, if you're Chicago, you're even like trying to pick up a player just to
and specifically defensemen, right? Like that's kind of what we were talking about. Chicago's like half their decor right now are rookies, right? So you also don't want to like one guy I think about right away who's not great but could help a team's like Jared Tenorti. Like he's not a bad bottom pairing defenseman who's big, good defensively, but it's also like I don't know. I kind of want him around, like. you have a couple younger defensemen where it's like you need these vet guys to be around. You can't have like 5 to 6 defensemen that are like under 25 years old. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. So it's like I wouldn't move on from him if I'm Chicago either. The West is where I feel like some of these trades could be coming from. Because like you said in the East, it's like almost every team is kind of like at least like not far out of the playoffs right now. It seems like. So I feel like if a trade is coming for like any team, it's probably coming from one of these lower tier Western Conference teams. And even then, it's like San Jose. Who the hell do they have to give? Like,
are you going to move on from your only NHL defenseman who's Ferraro? Like, you're not going to do that.
No, like I don't know how happy he is there, but I wouldn't like willingly trade him. He's got experience.
I'm looking at UFAs right now for this next offseason. Like, Alec Martinez, he's a UFA.
He's not going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere. Like Tyler Johnson in Chicago, that's a guy that I could see possibly getting traded. Because it's like
maybe it's a big cap hit though at $5 million.
Yeah, but if you're Chicago and you can retain half, like
yeah, not a bad ad.
That. Noah Hannafin, as we already mentioned, Chris Tanev, Tyson Barrie in Nashville. He's a UFA. Not what
More
Boston
of a
needs.
Moving offensive guy though, right? Like
not what Boston needs, but like that is a defensive UFA on a team that like I don't think will be making the playoffs. Like John Klingberg, like he's not fucking nobody's picking him
might
up.
not even
Like,
play.
there's not many pending UFAs really that are defensemen that are like it feels like the Flames have them all, so let's go Flames.
Well, I mean, this is why I think Conroy being patient's a really good call, right? Like you should kind of analyze what is out there offer-wise. Wait a little bit of time because, dude, you probably have the 3 most valuable unrestricted free agent defensemen this year. Teams are going to be calling, wanting these guys, man. Like I wouldn't just give them up for like peanuts.
Yeah, I think Karen Conroy's done a good job so far that like he hasn't made a move especially with Zadorov because like Zadorov came in and asked for that trade and like Conroy of course hasn't given him that.
They like
yet,
5-2-1 since he requested a trade.
They're playing better. They have 21 points right now in the
Beat Vegas last
Pacific.
night.
Fourth in the Pacific right now, still below 500, but like they're not out of it. They're not out of it yet. Like they're holding on. They're holding on to a wild card spot right now. So it's like even with them,
Another
it's
guy.
like you're gonna sell your UFAs, but like
one other guy I'm thinking that could be on the move. There's rumors around it last year was Dante Fabro in Nashville.
Yeah.
Because they also already got Shen on the right side, Carrier, and Barrie. So I really wonder, like, if Fabro's kind of on his way out. He's not a big cap hit either, right-handed shooting. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the move somewhere at some point this season as well, especially if Nashville's kind of fading out of that playoff picture. I think they're sort of in the same situation as Montreal right now, like record-wise. And they're the same thing, right? They got a bunch of young players they're hoping to develop, but Fabro, I feel like he's been there for so long, right? And he hasn't really like blossomed in anything. I feel like a change of scenery like might be needed for him.
Yeah, I could see that as being a move. I think we're definitely going to start to see players that could potentially be like trade targets over the next month and a half when the standings really start to settle down and teams do start to really fall out of it. Because right now, like as we mentioned a few minutes ago, like there's not many teams right now that are out of it. There's like the Blackhawks, the Sharks. Other than that, like any team could still make the playoffs realistically, and like it wouldn't be like super impossible to do.
No, especially in the East, right? Like it's not like super tight, but I mean, like a lot of teams. You're saying Montreal, it's like they're 500, they're 5 points out of the playoffs right now. Like it's not impossible to get in.
Well, like the worst team right now in the Eastern Conference is the Ottawa Senators. They've only played 17 games in all fairness, where the rest of the league has played like 20 to like 22 games. They have 16 points though, and the difference between them and a wild card spot is it looks like 8 points. Pardon me, 9 points. The Leafs are holding on to that second
in hand though.
While with 2 games in hand.
Yeah, so if they win both, you're 5-0, kind of like Montreal, right? So it's not like a lot much.
And that's the worst team, but that's the worst team in the Eastern Conference, though. So it's like,
yeah,
it's like
because you always talk about how like
right
American Thanksgiving, it's you kind of differentiate yourself. If you're out almost, and like, but it doesn't really seem that way in the Eastern Conference right now at all.
Yeah, this year in the Eastern Conference, man, like you have your top team, you have the guys running away with it being Boston, Rangers, Panthers are sort of running away with it. And then other than that, everybody else is like super close. Like, dude, the Devils are the third worst team right now in the Eastern Conference. And they're 4 points behind the Leafs. And they've played the same amount of games. So it's
Wow.
like
and they've had injuries and stuff, right? And I don't think their play has been as expected. So like I expect them to rebound and get in, to be honest. And they're not far out.
I think we should move on though to a Canadian team, the Vancouver Canucks. They started off the season so well. Over their last 7 games, though, they haven't been playing the greatest. They're 3-4-0 in their last 7. After a 4-3 loss to the league worst San Jose Sharks, head coach Rick Tocchet called out his team. He basically said that he's felt his team has been on a little slide recently. He was also saying after the Sharks loss that this was a learning lesson and playoff teams don't do this sort of stuff. So sort of calling out his team a little. But with the Canucks' recent play, like, are you hopping off the bandwagon? Are you still on it? Because I'm still on it a little bit, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I feel like I don't cheer for them or in any way, but I think they've put themselves in like a pretty solid position the way they started the year to like make the playoffs, especially with the Western Conference being pretty poor. They're obviously in like a really tight division up at the top with Vegas and the LA being really solid teams this year, right? I kind of expect them at this point, unless they completely fall off the cliff, that they are going to end up getting in. I feel like they might be more third place in the division to a wild card spot, maybe. But I think they have a little bit different structure this year with Tocchet coming in. They've got 3 of the top goal scorers in the league right now in Miller, Pettersson, Quinn Hughes. Hronek's been a pretty nice partner to Quinn Hughes. Finally, he's getting that guy that can
top 3 goalie.
Yeah, you got to. I honestly would probably still pick him for the Vezina at this point. He's been really solid. Like nothing's really been on him. I feel like he's been really consistent so far this year. So I don't know. I think Vancouver, I think they're just kind of falling out of that super hot start, but I still think that they're definitely good enough of a team to like get into the playoffs. And like, what are they, 14-7-3 or something? Like, it's not.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good record. Like, still, you know what I mean. And we're talking about them being in a little bit of a slump. So I think they're still in a pretty good position. They're just gonna have to like get out of this funk.
Yeah, they're making the playoffs for sure. I'm not too worried about them. I don't think they're the team that we were seeing like early on in the season where they're a top 3-4 team in the NHL, but I definitely think they're a top 10 team in the NHL going forward. Like they haven't been playing the greatest these last 7 games, but man, their top end talent has been so good this year, dude. Like
it has been really good.
It's hard not to watch this team and like.
The surprising thing though is, dude, like, do you see Kuzmenko was scratched for two games?
Yeah,
like,
I did.
A little bit of a poor play from him recently, but he was back on that first line. So I mean, I think Tocchet's just trying to like lay down the law a little bit with like, man, if you're not gonna play good or whatever, like I'm not really afraid to scratch you. But I think he'll rebound. He's been a really solid player since he got to Vancouver. Do you expect this team really to like compete for the top of the division at all? I know you're saying they're not a top team, but like Vegas isn't like I don't want to say a funk. They're still winning a bit, but they haven't been as dominant as the start either, right?
Vegas is in a funk.
And LA, dude, LA's looking solid.
I think Vegas is sort of in a funk. Like in their last 10, man, they're 3-5-2. Like it's not great. Like Canucks and Vegas right now, they've both played 22 games. Canucks are only 2 points behind Vegas, so it's like you're still in there.
Yeah, you're still in the hunt for that top of the division, but I feel like this is the division this year where it's like last year without remember right at the last end of the season, it was between Colorado, Minnesota, Dallas for that top spot. And then it was like they didn't want to finish
You didn't want to finish 2 or 3 because then you get that really hard first round matchup. I feel like it's like that, but in this division this year, where you really want to win the division because you do not want to be playing a 2-3 matchup in that first round. Because, man, like imagine Vegas wins the division, LA, Vancouver, first round. Boom. That's a tough series for Vancouver if you're in third place. Like, you know what I mean? You want to try and win that division if you can.
This division right now is the most top heavy looking at standings. Like Vancouver's third with 29 points, where out of all the other third place teams in their divisions, the one with the highest total points is 25, being the Detroit Red Wings and Tampa Bay Lightning tied there, right? But like Vancouver, like being third in the division with 29 points, like man, like that's tough, dude. That's tough. And if you are playing LA or Vegas in a 2-3 matchup in the playoffs, like oh fuck, that's gonna be a good series though, man.
I'd almost prefer to finish like first wild card and play the freaking division winner on the other side. Like honestly, like
Colorado.
I don't know.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, LA probably looking better than them right now. Like LA's been super consistent, man, this year, and they're getting scoring like up and down their lines. Trevor Moore's like turning into like a star right now.
Quentin Byfield looks like he's going to be a point per game player this season, which is like
huge for them.
Good on him, man.
Man, you think it's a little bit with him, like it's his development, but like also they bring in Dubois and there's no room for him at center, and he's kind of just almost like a little bit of like a screw, not like a screw you, but it's like it felt like they couldn't really like trust him long term center, and now he's just like, okay, whatever, I'll do it on the wing.
I think it's a mix of both his development and him being like, screw this. Because like as we mentioned when we were talking to Garrett about the New York Rangers and Lafreniere, like Lafreniere went into a system where like he was a high pick, but he went into a team that already had their core and sort of wanted to win. Like, so it was sort of the same thing with Byfield. Like by the time Byfield got into the LA Kings lineup, like they're already making playoffs. They were already had their core, and Byfield wasn't playing in the top of that lineup. So now that he is playing higher up in that lineup and playing with some more skilled players, I think that's helping him out a lot as well. And then also, yeah, like it probably is a little bit of like a fuck you. Like I was drafted second overall. I should be this.
Yeah, like I'm 21, man.
Yeah.
Like it's not like they haven't been like waiting on this guy for years and years and years. Like he's still really young, and it's like, dude, it's crazy to think what he could be like at like 24, 25.
Yeah. Well, he's a big body, man. Like I like him a lot as a player. I loved him in the OHL. Like I've always been a pretty big Quentin Byfield guy, so it's definitely great seeing him succeed. I think we covered a fair bit this episode, though, Mark. Of course, we got back to having our guest celebrities on, getting D on. I know going forward, we're going to try to be as consistent as we can, bring on some guest appearances to talk about their teams and really get like a fan experience from an actual fan of the team. It's just not me and you speaking some bullshit about some team we don't care about. We got some big news, though. I know if you've been watching on YouTube, we've just had our graphics up for the whole podcast, but going forward, not this episode, hopefully for next week, we have our studio all set up and we can record in person next week, Mark. But man, I'm pretty hyped for the studio, dude. It's gonna be a blast going forward, starting to record in person, just having like actual video on the podcast. I know you saw the studio last night, so that should be fun going forward.
I'm pretty excited, man. It's going to be like a little bit, obviously I still enjoy doing it on Zoom, but like being in person would be a little bit different of a dynamic. I think it'd be pretty cool. You can definitely incorporate a couple different things. Like we were talking about potentially maybe even if there's another, whatever that night was called, all the games, I'm already forgetting.
Frozen Frenzy,
like another one of those, man. I'd love to like live stream that. Maybe we even like live stream this like player draft for the All Star game too. Like, I don't know if anyone else has got any ideas too, like reach out to us. Definitely interested in doing some other things, making some videos, consistently doing this pod every week. Love doing it. So, I mean, we're always talking about the NHL, but I know you want to talk about like the World Juniors are coming up in less than a month from now too, right?
We'll be talking about.
There's a lot of projections for teams. Kind of curious to see who they narrow it down to, and then maybe that's next week. We'll get into that a little bit more.
Oh yeah, well, for sure. Going forward, we're going to be talking about the World Juniors now that it's getting close. Over the World Junior break, like Christmas break, there, like we might even have to do 2 podcasts that week, just a full World Juniors one, and then like an NHL breakdown one. But yeah, going forward, there's going to be a lot of big things coming from here. More podcasts, potentially a lot more stories, just some better production. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But yeah, this was episode 9 of the Point NHL Recap Show. Thanks everybody for listening.